right. Cool. Hello and welcome to the Black and Loved panel. Today is Saturday, February 5th. And I just want to start by saying thank you everybody for joining this session today. We're going to be delving into the discussion of, Black self-care and the love that we have for ourselves. And thank you once again to all of our panel participants today. Thank you just for joining and sharing your knowledge with us. This is a really important topic, I feel like, especially really within these last 2 years. There's been a lot that's going on just in the world, and because of that within the community. And so I feel like, this space is definitely something that is so very important and very essential. So yeah, before we actually jump into everything, I'm actually going to start with just some intros, just so we can get to know each other a little bit more. So I will start. My name is Natsumi McGee. I graduated from the University of California, Davis in 2019, where I studied sociology and double minored in African American studies and education. And I was an athlete there for 4 years. I did track and field. And I'm currently working within the realm of fitness. And I'm in CADSA because not only just to work on my organizing skills, but also to reach back and help out fellow Black student athletes and kind of just spread more knowledge on just the Black student athlete world, because that is a whole world within itself. And it's just good getting information out there to just the public about just the stuff that happens in just the Black student athlete space. Yeah, so, and I wanted to do this panel too, because it is February, which of course is Black History Month. And it's also known as the month of love too. So kind of just fusing those two concepts together. Black self-love, once again, is something that, needs to be talked about a lot more so. Yeah, so that's me. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to y'all. Anybody could start, but we're just gonna go with, your name, where you're from, your field of study, and then why you chose to be part of the panel. So anybody could go.
I'll go ahead and get started. Can you guys hear me okay? I have my earpiece in.
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Bernadette Nicholas. I was born and raised in Sacramento. I have lived in Southern California, specifically Long Beach, for my entire adult life. I initially actually was a software developer. When I graduated with my degree, it was in computer engineering. But through the years, I realized that was not where my passion was. And I found that passion was actually in education. I began to work for an after-school program as a supervisor there, and then made a shift when I had my son. I went back to school, started studying child development, and really felt that is where my calling was. That is where I was most passionate, helping children and families. So that is where I am now. I'm currently a preschool teacher. Actually, I'm a kindergarten teacher as of this year. I started with the kindergarten. I'm a kindergarten teacher at a school in Long Beach. It's a private school. And I love the work that I do. I love working with both the children and the families. So I really have a passion about supporting all children, and especially children in marginalized communities, especially Black children, because as a Black woman, I've experienced what that means to be raised as a Black person in this country. And so that's where my heart is, helping all families, and especially those families that have been often pushed to the edges and pushed to the margins.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody that would like to go? I think underneath you, I think I see is Brandon, if you would like to go.
I'll let Maya go first and let I think that's appropriate.
All right.
Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Maya Ba. I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland, but I currently live in Houston, Texas. I've been here for the last 2 years, and I'm currently working as a licensed social worker. I work in primary care, but I work as a behavioral care manager, kind of helping patients with like depression and anxiety. And I kind of got into the field because I wanted to do individual therapy, so like psychotherapy, but specifically focusing in the Black community, because I realized that there wasn't a lot of Black clinicians, and just trying to like close the gap and increase access to care. And so when I was told about the panel, I was really excited because spaces like this really need to exist, and we don't have a lot of spaces like this. And yeah, like just being a part of the Black community and coming from like parents who are from West Africa, seeing that, you know, mental health isn't really a thing there, or it's not really talked about. So definitely like wanted to be a part of this conversation.
Cool, thank you so much. And then Brandon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Rice. I am originally from Pasadena, California. One of my homeboys, he made this, he has this clothing line, Pasadena Classic. He also went to UC Davis. He graduated in 2008. I graduated in 2009. I played football at UC Davis during my years there. And I majored in kinesiology. Now, following that, I became a nurse. I've been a nurse for 5 years. And now I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner student. And I won't say where, because they might say something about, you know, the media type stuff. I don't want to get involved, but I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner student, and mental health has become my passion due to my own experience and watching others experience. So why I chose to be a part of this panel is because I think it's such a imperative space to provide and to have these conversations, especially in the Black community, in our community. I am half Black, half white. I know I'm very light skinned, but you know, my Black experience is different than some others. So I'm very honored and pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, thank you. And just listening to y'all talk, honestly, I'm super excited to just get into this, because I feel like y'all have the background just exactly for what we were trying to, you know, incorporate with this panel. Thank you for sharing everything. I'm glad we got a chance to kind of get to know our backgrounds. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and hop into our first question. Give me 1 second. Oh, and before we do, so once again, just going over today, we're going to be, you know, explaining self-care. Our purpose being here, you know, its importance in the working world today. We're going to be discussing the role of mental health within the diaspora and in the world of sports, which, you know, I feel like is just things that are just not talked about, like especially in the athletic world, just coming from there, you know. And then we're going to also be ending it by identifying some self-care concepts and practices for, you know, our younger audiences too. So that's kind of our purpose here today. So yeah, we'll jump into the first question. So in today's age, self-care is a phrase that's constantly, you know, being echoed throughout, you know, workplaces and friend groups. So the first question is going over kind of the importance of self-care. Why is it needed, especially in today's times where, you know, we see so much of grind culture, like this hustle mentality, right? It's constantly being thrown at us. So we'll go ahead and break this down into the first part, which is just what is self-care? And anybody can go ahead and go.
Okay, I'll answer this. So I think self-care is like number one, getting your needs met on a basic level. So like when I think about that, I think about housing, I think about eating healthily, I think about taking care of your body and your space. And this could be anything from like having a full-time job or the means to do this, but it's also having the support and time to take care of yourself. But I think beyond like just basic needs, it's doing things that bring you fulfillment outside of like those practicalities of life. Because naturally, like we have like ups and downs of life, right? So just like finding ways to reduce your stress, but also being able to manage it even when things are kind of like going well.
I totally agree with what Maya said. And one thing that I would like to add is that there's only one person that you're going to be with from the day that you're born until the day that you die. And that's yourself. Your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your best friends, everyone's going to come and go. And really understanding how to nourish that relationship with yourself so you can ride those waves of life like Maya was talking about, learning to deal with the stresses of life. Um, it's not about getting rid of the triggers that create stress in your life. It's about learning to deal with those triggers. And I think that's what really self-care is about. And it begs the question, well, okay, you talk about self-care, but how do you learn to provide self-care to yourself? And I think one is awareness. You have to learn what it is that you need for yourself. You have to pay attention. And with that comes understanding of yourself. And then also comes some reflection. So I got more to say on that topic, but I don't want to take up too much time.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to touch on something you just said too, but I'd like to open the floor out to Bernadette too before I do my answer.
Yeah, I think one of the best definitions that I've heard in my learning of self-care is really knowing yourself well enough to constantly assess, where you are now and what you need. And like Maya said, it may not always be you're in a bad place. It may not always be that things are not going well, that you're stressed. Um, Things might be going really well, but you still have needs in those times. Also, we have needs for joy, we have needs for connection, we have all sorts of needs beyond just managing the hard times. So, self-care and self-love, being really taking care of yourself in those moment to moment, knowing what you need, what you desire, even what you want, and knowing how to meet those desires, those needs, those wants in ways that are healthy, in ways that are nourishing for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and yeah, just touching back on something that I feel like I really resonated with that Brandon said was, identifying these triggers, right? Because a lot of times, how society makes it seems is that, everybody's got to be geared up and ready to go all the time. But everybody has, triggers, certain things that, might cause you to, stop a little bit and have to reassess. Everybody has those. And, being able to be in touch with yourself and in touch with what may cause that, it's not something that needs to be avoided but rather understood, right? I think that was a really awesome point. And just going back on the definition of self-care, I would say that, I feel like that's just, it's doing what you need to do in order to be good at what you do or be ready at what you do, right? um Another perfect example that I had heard about, I forget who told me, but they said that, when you're in an airplane and say something goes wrong and the masks fall down, I thought the first reaction would be to make sure everybody, if you're with a small child, like make sure you get the mask on them. But I was talking with somebody and they're like, no, the first thing that you're actually supposed to do is put the mask and place it on yourself. And that blew my mind because I was like, why wouldn't you, think about everybody else? But in order to take care and make sure that everybody else is good, you first have to make sure that yourself is good. And that blew my mind. And it really had me kind of reevaluating, oh, in order to give to others, because it's always nice to be able to give to others, but you can't give to others and make sure others are good if you yourself are not good, right?
So to touch on that, one thing I think about a lot, there's that common saying, right? You can't pour from an empty cup, but none of us are empty cups. So when you say you can't pour from an empty cup, that's not really an accurate portrayal of what's going to happen. More likely, what it is what's in your cup is unhealthy. What's in your cup is gone, right? And it's going to pour. So the question is, what will pour from your cup? Not you can't pour from them. But what is going to pour from your cup? Is it going to be love? Is it going to be care? Is it going to be joy? Or is it going to be something else?
Right.
That's a fantastic point. And I just want to make one more comment is that within this self-care realm, I think it's really, really important to understand that we're constantly evolving, and that is the human experience. So who you were 10 years ago, who I was as an athlete at UC Davis, is not who I am now. I can take those characteristics that I learned, but it does me a disadvantage to be like, oh, come on, like I could do the same workouts. I could be the same guy I was. I could do this, and really judging yourself for somebody who you were in the past and not accepting who you're becoming on a daily situational level.
Right. Exactly. And just having that grace with yourself too, being able, I know specifically for me this past year, being able to just have more grace with yourself that, you're not always going to be where you're at, but still finding a way to love yourself no matter what the circumstances are. That's definitely a lesson for me this year with self-care that I've really had to remind myself time and time again. Yeah, awesome. And just touching back on, grind culture and this hustle mentality, right? As a student athlete, and Brandon, you too, being a football player, hustle mentality is kind of ingrained into this world of sports, right? And that's something we're going to talk about in the third question as well. But as far as grind culture, is there any benefits? Can self-care and grind culture, can they coincide, or do they always have to be, at odds with one another, these two cultures?
Anybody want? I don't want to take over the conversation, but I would say that you can grind in self-care. You can change the way that you grind. Um, and part of the grind, one thing that I really like to say is that rest is part of the grind, which it was not when I was at UC Davis. I would 5 workouts a day in the off season, doing workouts before our workouts as a team, because I was watching on ESPN. I was watching Jerry Rice. I was watching Terrell Owens. I was reading these books, and I was just like, oh, all they do is grind. They breathe, eat, sleep, football. That's all it's about, and that's my dream. And what I didn't understand is that everybody's grind is different, and you have to respect your own grind, which is, and what we're talking about here, you have to respect your own self-care, and rest is a part of that. And you can implement grind into self-care, and I think that is the ultimate recipe for success.
One thing that I think about a lot is, like Brendan was saying earlier, is we're all different, right? We all operate differently. And part of self-care is understanding yourself, understanding your needs, understanding what you can handle in a safe and healthy way. And I think the same thing goes with the grind culture. I know some people who thrive on that, they flourish on that movement. And even in their rest, it looks different than what my rest looks like. And so their grind is going to look different than my grind. Their rest is going to look different than my rest. And what's important is not how it looks, is that, is it restful for me? Or is it productive for me? What are the things that I need to be doing to fulfill the calling, to fulfill, my sense of joy and fulfillment for myself?
Absolutely. And Maya, I'm not sure if you wanted to also touch on this as well.
No, I think Bernadette and Brandon and you kind of summarized it. Just like when I hear you guys talking, I'm thinking of prioritizing, but also setting boundaries, and not like for other people, which is also included in self care, right? But really setting boundaries for yourself, saying, okay, um, what's worth it, right? Like I do need to take these moments of rest and these moments to, I don't want to say feel back into myself because Bernadette's analogy was just so great, but like pouring the right things into myself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that was a common theme that I heard among just all of your responses is just rest, right? Because, we're not machines. And a lot of times in athletics and just in the world in general, we are geared to be these constantly working things. But, our body, this organic matter, it needs rest, it needs fuel, it needs these things to be able to be ready to get up and do another day, right? So, I'm hearing a lot of rest, which is really great. I feel like that's not something I figured out until like after college, after I stopped running. I was like, oh, rest is important, huh? So yeah, it's definitely um something to, worthy to be touched on. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move into our second question of the panel. So, what are some self care practices that are unique to the people of the African diaspora, specifically within Black America? I'll go ahead and set the timer for this. So my mind frame in coming up with this question was more so, there are certain experiences that a group of people could go through that not everyone else living in the rest of the country could go through. And, of course, we could talk about family trauma and generational trauma as well, but there's also something called racial trauma. And, I feel like that's something worth mentioning as far as a group of people goes. I recently was doing some research online and I figured out that Martin Luther King, he was born as the same year as my grandmother. And, Ruby Bridges, which of course was the first African American child to desegregate William France Elementary School in Louisiana, she's only 67, which goes to say that Black people are still healing from a lot of things as far as human history goes. All of these things are actually relatively very recent, right? So in terms of self-care, are there any practices that, Black people specifically take on that may look different than, your bubble baths or, your stay-at-home movie nights?
I can think of some just off the top of my head, like being a Black woman, but also just so I did like a cosmetology program, right? And I realized that in doing hair, like women, it's a social thing, right? Like you come to do your hair and you're talking to your stylist, or you go to a barbershop and get your hair cut. And it's a therapeutic setting because you're like talking about your week and you're talking about things that have happened, controversial things that have happened, things that Black people are going through. So it's like that shared space. And it's not like your conventional bubble bath or bubble bomb or spa day, but it is a therapeutic setting. So I think practices that are unique to our identity, but yeah, I'll let the others kind of answer.
One thing that I'll say is I honestly don't believe that a view of self-care that looks at, bubble bath and spa days serves any community, quite frankly, and especially not communities that have histories of marginalization, histories of, harm done to them. So I think one, it doesn't serve anyone. And two, I think all communities need to look at their past, their histories, right? I think that people who are not Black need to reckon with their histories, need to examine what may have come from there. And the same for us, it's going to look different. It'll look different for us. Our histories are different. Our struggles are differences. Our joys are different. And I think that when we really examine those pieces is where it will look different for us.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Nasumi. You might want to say something.
I'm going to go after you. Go.
Okay. Okay. I think what Maya and Bernadette both said are very, very profound and real. Being at the barbershop for myself has really been a nice self-care practice, especially recently. I've only been really deep into this self-care for maybe a few years, if that. And recently I was feeling kind of down. I went to go get my hair cut and I felt this immediate rejuvenation. And I was just like, man, this is really, really nice. And it feels good. And this is for me, this is one of my self-cares. And for what Bernadette is saying is something that I thought of. So Natsumi, to go directly to your answer, we could do hip hop, we could do R&B, we could do types of Black music, right? You can surround yourself with images of positive Black images and content. You can surround yourself with positive Black people around you, right? Or just non-white people, specifically to Black America. But what Bernadette was talking about, what I got from that is that the Black experience cannot be defined in a box. You can't say everybody on this panel has a different Black experience. You can have commonalities, but you can't say, hey, Brandon, this is your Black experience. You get pulled over by the cops all the time. You go through this, you go through that. I don't. I've had friends who deal with that, but because I'm light skinned, I have not dealt with that in a situation, right? So it's really important for me and for me to say and to explain that your Black experience is your Black experience. Your self-care is your self-care. And if you find something that it has specifically to do with Black America that really helps you, then take that and know that, acknowledge that, and embrace that, right? Because there's so many generalizations that we can come up with on this panel, and we could just be like, is that really the Black experience? Like, it could be, but it's not for me, right? So I think allowing yourself to define what Black means to you is very important.
Yeah, and I really like that this, repetition of saying that the Black experience, it is whatever the Black person whose experience it is. There's nobody who can say you're not doing it right or this is what you should be doing. It's just whatever your lived in experience is, and that's what's going to define it for you, no matter what part of the spectrum you are on, for being Black. I definitely really like that. And also touching on what Maya said as well, with hair, that's just not even something I thought about. That's just such a good, just historically speaking, Black hair has always been, for some reason, this huge discussion in this country, and even in other countries too. And just us being able to have this space where we're able to, do what we do with our own hair, and talk about family stuff and talk about all the stuff going on in our life. That is definitely a space where I feel like, Black people can come and just talk about whatever experience, is going on in their lives. That's a kind of a community that we can, gear towards when we're talking about our experiences. Absolutely. When I was thinking of this question, as far as, self-care practices that I do, specifically being a Black woman in America, for me, reading up on books that were written specifically by Black women, that calms me down a lot, because I feel like it's paying homage to the people that came before me. All the comfort that I'm living right now did not come without a price. And so I'm really big on written word, and our history is being written down. So being able to read this history and get these lessons that these Black women that have came before me are passing along to me, that I can pass along to my daughters, that's for me a type of Black self-care. Another thing too would be, in my family, we cook a lot too. So even passing down recipes, or, talking to the family elders, those are self-care practices that I feel like, because they're not going to always be around. And once again, I feel like our story being passed, a lot of our history, at least in the context of America, has been altered, has been changed, deleted. So, for me, hearing what the people that before me have to say, that's how I specifically practice, my self-care. Um, and I guess also therapy too. That in itself could, I feel like, be a whole panel as far as therapy in the Black community. But to keep it short, also just, making sure that my mental health is good. I feel like that's, you know, um, making me feel like a Black, like making me feel valued as a Black woman. Like what I have to say, what I think, what I, feel matters. It deserves a space. Um, Absolutely. And so reiterating the kind of nuance of different lived experience, just a follow-up question for this question. Is there a difference in self-care between Black men and women? We kind of touched on it, I feel like, but I wanted to kind of delve a little bit deeper as far as just the nuance of lived experiences. And then we'll have Brandon. I think it sounds like something, seems like you have to.
Yeah, I think there can totally, you can talk about this for hours in terms of Black women, Black men, um, in terms of the lived experience. Say the question one more time so I can.
Absolutely. So once again, reiterating the nuance of different lived experiences, is there a difference in self-care between Black men and women? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's there's definitely a big difference, and there can also be commonalities, but the biggest difference I would say for me is just you take in that idea of what is being a man, and then what is being Black. I mean, being a man, for me, used to be associated with, you have to be machismo, you have to open the door for women, you have to, and never hit a woman. There's all these definitions about what being a man is, and then what is being Black in America. And being a Black man in America is that you're always a threat. No matter what, you are always a threat. And you can go into the history of film in Black America and how they portrayed Black men as the one who raped women, being of a, like more like a beast and all that, right? So what would self-care look like specifically for us? um I'm to a point now where it's just like, it you can't really put a gender. It's not binary, right? I can't think in terms of binary anymore. But I used to back in the day. And self-care could be like hanging out with the boys and playing football, and you got to be an athlete. But now it's like, if you want to do yoga, do yoga. Like, who cares? It's not that big of a deal. So it's a little bit of a hard question to, after I've been training my mind to be that non-binary. And if you want to be in nature, maybe that used to be like, oh, that's a female thing, or that's a white thing, or it's a thing. If you want to do it, go do it. So that's a tough question, but hopefully it spurred up something in everyone's mind so we can continue to have a good discussion.
I think when I think about that question, that the term intersectionality comes to mind, right? Like all these different intersections. It's going to look different to be, to have an experience as a Black woman, to have an experience as a Black man, a Black queer person, a Black disabled person, a Black old person, a Black young person, a Black person who has more financial means, a Black a trans person who doesn't have financial needs, a Black child, in a growing up in poverty. There's just so many different intersections. And I think it all boils down to, again, like getting in touch with yourself, getting in touch with your history, getting in touch with where you are now and what you need in this moment to be okay, to be good, to thrive. We want to move past just this idea of like, we're just we're managing. No, what do you need to thrive in this moment based on your history, based on all these different parts of you, your character, your experience in this country, wherever spaces that you're in, based on all of you, what do you need?
Right. And, something that's really great about, I feel like, the world that we live in today, as far as self-care, is that there are a lot of blurred lines now, which not is not inherently a bad thing, right? Kind of like you were saying, Brandon, about how going out in nature, typically is considered maybe a white thing, maybe a female thing, but really it's just whatever can get you geared up once again to get up and then get up for the next day, right? Get geared up to keep doing what it is that you do and making sure that you're good. And I love that, with in today's world, that we're always questioning these lines, right? Whereas maybe 50 years ago there was specifically straight boxes that you had to place yourself in, and now in today's times we actually have, the luxury of being able to say, well, hey, stop for a second and say, hey, let's question some of these. Are these inherently the things that we have to go by? If not, what does it look like, right? So all of these experiences that, that y'all are saying, where it could look like different things for different people, I feel like that's a luxury that was not, happening 50 years ago. And I just love that we're constantly pushing boundaries, and even 20 years from now too, it'll probably even be a different definition. So it sounds like it's a working, constantly changing thing, which is a beautiful thing. Awesome. And so I want to make sure that we are on time for this question. So we'll go ahead and move on. But before we move to the next question, this is a picture that I actually came across as I was doing some research on Black self-care practices. I'm not sure if anybody knows who this individual is, but this is Rosa Parks in 1973, and she's practicing yoga. And I just thought that was amazing. Yoga is something that me myself have been getting into a little bit more so. It's just anything. I've always been a very, body oriented, like active body. And I just thought it was just amazing that this, Black figure, she's just on the ground practicing yoga. And something else that I found as well is that, within the African diaspora, there's Ethiopian references actually to the Queen of Sheba, also known as Queen Makeda. And Ethiopians observed her and her people bowing down to greet the rising and setting sun. And if you're familiar with yoga, that's similar to kind of the sun salutations. And so I just thought to share that picture. I thought it was super awesome. I had no idea that Rosa Parks, doing all that she did. She practiced yoga in her free time. That was how she, you know, used her body, as far as like, her freedoms. And I thought that was cool. All right. So before we get into this question, I know that we have some former athletes here. In your experience, just to the athletes, as far as nerves and performance anxiety goes, how did you go about dealing with that as far as in the realm of sports yourself? Want to start this space with that question.
I guess I can go. Um, that's so funny that you say sports performance anxiety is. I didn't know what anxiety. I didn't have an understanding of what anxiety really was, and I didn't know that I was actually very very anxious, especially in new situations. Um, for instance, when oh, and to answer your question, what did I do about it? I didn't do anything. I was just try to fight through it. I didn't have any coping skills that I knew of. Um, Everything was just I'm just trying to do my best. And there was one time for the bench press. You got to bench press 225 pounds as part of the combine to get into the NFL, and they count how many times you do it. And before going to the combine, whenever I was in a comfortable zone, I could hit 225 21 times. That was the most I could ever do. But when I went to the combine at San Jose State, I could only do 14. And that is textbook like anxiety, performance anxiety. You're not performing up to the level that you have performed. And going into professional level, I was a part of this league called the United Football League, and same thing, anxiety, which can lead to injuries as well. So I think it's very, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's very, very important. And it's where I want to solidify myself as a psychiatric nurse practitioner moving forward in the world of athletics to assist people with stuff like that. So,
Right. Considering that you came from it and you kind of understand what they might be going through.
right.
Exactly. Before I do my answer, Maya, if you wanted like to answer.
Yeah, so I'm not a former athlete. I never played a sport, but I would say that just with the performance anxiety, like thinking about textbook and thinking about how there's so much pressure on athletes to always perform, and not only like themselves, right, but other people around them. So I think having space to, yes, like be an athlete, which is a part of your identity, but also like all the other things that you are, right, and like being able to be vulnerable and like learn those skills. So when I think of that, I think of like healing circles. I think of like groups where people look like you or kind of have that shared experience, and kind of being able to process your emotions about those challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely. Just creating those spaces for people to, feel vulnerable enough to be able to open up about these things that, are typically, brushed under the rug, right? I know for my experience running track for 12 years, my biggest issue as far as dealing or tackling this topic was like injuries. So injuries were always so difficult, especially being a track and field runner. If you have any leg injuries, that could just take you out. And the thing is, you never know for how long, right? But the thing about athletics, and something that we were kind of touching on before too, is that there's a lot of hustle mentality. It's like, okay, the show's got to go on. That meat's not going to wait for you and your hamstring to, recover. Like the show's got to go on, season's going to keep coming. So for me being an athlete, that was really tough. That was really tough because, you might be looked at by your teammates, even your coach. Whereas, if you wanted to take some time off and kind of recover, they might be like, oh, okay, well, you were part of the relay. Now we kind of have to, figure out what we're going to do. Just stuff like that too. So there was kind of this anxiety about being open with my injuries. And it was always really tough for me because that's my body, right? And in order to finish out the season, I have to take care of it right now. But, right now kept on moving. So for me, I think injuries were kind of a really tough tough, bargain with athletics. That was just something you kind of had to deal with. And then also what you were saying, Brandon, as far as performance anxiety, making sure that, you're hitting your times, you're hitting your marks. If you don't, what happens then? Right. You get these things going in your head where you're just like, if I don't do it, what does that say about me? Um, and the reason why this kind of came into play too is because the most recent, I feel like, controversial, um, big name athlete where this kind of came into play was, Simone Biles, of course. Last year in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, of course, she pulled out in the I think it was all around final. Yeah. And she was actually qualified to win 3 of those events. And she, of course, shocked the world when, she decided to pull out due to her mental health. Same thing with Naomi Osaka back in the French Open, right? She actually came out with a Netflix documentary. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that, but she is completely transparent about just the press, the intense pressure that comes with being such a high profile athlete. Um, so yeah, at this current point in time, what does the mental health conversation sound like in sports? Does being transparent, is that doing more bad than good? And anybody can answer that one.
I mean, I think when you have powerful like athletes like using their voice, right? They're advocating for themselves, but also maybe advocating for a lot of other athletes who are kind of going through the same thing. And just in hearing both of your experiences, I'm thinking about how they're so reflective of just how we view medicine in general and taking care of ourselves. Like the mind and body is so compartmentalized when really like you have both of those things and it makes you who you are, but you're really only focused on the physical. And then this is getting like your mental is getting
Neglected.
started. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, I forget which coach said it to me, but he told me that athletics was 90% mental and 10% physical. Really, if you're a track runner and you're going in the blocks, if you're thinking about, oh, this injury or the girl next to me or something like that, you're out of the race. That's just kind of how that goes. So mental health and all these things about being an athlete, that plays such a big part, and I feel like it's just a conversation that is just constantly being omitted. You know.
Agreed. I definitely agree, and that's another reason why I really want to step into the athletic space. Your question is transparency in athletics doing more good or bad? I would say it's doing more good, and I would say that because as an athlete, for me, my one of my most prized possessions was my longevity. I want to go to the NFL. I want to have a long career in the NFL. This is what I want to do. And if you take a moment to address your injury, your longevity is going to go as long as you can go. But if you're running on a bad leg for years and years and years, eventually you're going to need surgery, or
Right.
eventually you're going to get to the point where you're just going to be a flat tire, right? Where if you stop, and this is something that I wish somebody would have told me, but at the same time, I'm glad they didn't, because I wouldn't be here right now. But you know what I'm saying? Um, Take care, like Marshawn Lynch says, and one of my homeboys posted this on Facebook last night. Take care of your chicken. You got to take care of your mental. You have to, because longevity, you have to take care of yourself. And it's really also about promoting autonomy among athletes, as especially Black athletes, right? We come from a community where it's like, if you want to be a professional and you want to make a lot of money, athlete first, always athlete first. But also with that athletic state of mind, it's somebody has control over where you go. You have an agent, you have a team and they take you from the East Coast to the West Coast, down to the South, up to the North, and they put you wherever, you know what I'm saying? They put you wherever they think you should go, and really taking care of yourself and challenging the status quo, to be like, you know what, no, I'm done, like Simone Biles did, like Naomi did. I'm done, I'm cool, I'm gonna take rest, I'm gonna do me, and then you'll come back even better. And if you don't come back better performance wise, you'll come back better as an overall person wise, and that's what it's about.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely I really liked what you said about just the point you touched on with the autonomy. You know, even being high profile like that, Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, they don't really, you know, they might be able to travel and people look at their lives, they're like, wow, you were living at the top of your game. You're a professional athlete, you get to travel to all these places, be in these cool arenas. But what people seem to forget is that all of those stuff that's been scheduled by somebody else. What they say in press conferences has to be looked over by somebody else, right? So a lot of their autonomy really is being stripped from them. Um, and at some point, you know, not only do you have to think about, you know, a press conference or a press release, but now you're also having to think about actual competition on top of that, right? So it's a crazy battle. I can only imagine, you know, when I found that Simone Biles, you know, pulled out at the Olympics, you know what I mean? That was, I mean, it shocked the world. I'm sure you all, you know, recall, you know, kind of just the outlash. Um, and I want to make sure we stay on time too. Um, but I just want to also point out that as I was doing some research about, you know, mental health and athletics and how athletics can impact athletes, I found that there is an organization and they're called the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine. And they published a position statement in 2020 that talked about mental health and athletes. And they found that, you know, there's a lot, you know, with a grain of salt, you got to take athletics because there's a lot of negative. Of course, there's a positive, you know, winning the competitions and, you know, staying in shape and all that stuff. But there are a lot of drawbacks to athletics. And on the individual level, they found that a lot of athletes or past athletes, they had a lot of perfectionist tendencies. You know, they were overly critical of themselves. A lot of them developed eating disorders, right? To make sure, like if you're a wrestler, making sure you stay with weight. And even on the social level too, we were kind of touching on performance anxiety. So, you know, there's a lot that I feel like people forget that goes into athletics. It's not just the medals, right? It's not just the winning. It's not just all of these amazing trophies and accomplishments. There's really a lot to gear up mentally to be able to perform, to be able to go to these places, right? Absolutely. And to end this question as well, with a quote that Simone Biles actually put out after she had pulled out from the Olympics, she had put on her social media, she had said, we also have to focus on ourselves because at the end of the day, we're human too. And, you know, that's completely valid. I thought that was, yeah, she definitely shocked the world with that one. I love it. Absolutely.
You're a
So we're
person before you're an athlete.
absolutely.